Welcome to the Brain on Sex. We're going to look at how the brain is the key component of sexual arousal, done so by breaking up the parts of the brain and then reviewing research to see those parts in action. The brain is in control of all of our thoughts, senses like touch, taste, sight, smell, and sound, and actions, like the action of holding hands or kissing someone, and then the sensations that come from that as well. The brain is super complex, so we're going to look at the sections which are involved in sex, which are inside the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. In the temporal lobe is the limbic system, which houses the main parts of sexual arousal, and in the frontal lobe is the motor cortex. There are many parts of the limbic system, but the four that we're focusing on are the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and then connected to the hypothalamus is the pituitary gland. First, let's take a look at the hippocampus. The hippocampus is in charge of memory and processes learning, which is important to sex because it determines sexual responses in physical and arousing situations based on memory. Next, we have the amygdala, which is a group of neural clusters that influence aggression and fear. This is also your automatic response. So when your body goes into flight, fight, or freeze mode, that is your amygdala at work. Next, we have the hypothalamus, which is where the physical stuff starts to happen. The hypothalamus is in charge of body maintenance and autonomic processes like breathing, digestion, and heartbeat. It also controls the pituitary gland. And this is so important to sex because it triggers sex glands, which then release sex hormones throughout the body. Within the hypothalamus region is the NACC, or nucleus accumbens, and although this is a tiny part of the brain, it has big effects, as it is the reward system of the brain, which processes positive and negative stimuli, which administers dopamine and serotonin neurotransmitters throughout the brain and body. We'll get to why these neurotransmitters are important a little later. Moving on to the frontal lobe, we have the motor cortex, which is involved in all movement, such as swimming, running, kissing, thrusting. You get the point. We then have the cerebral cortex, which is our personality, or where mental processes happen, and this is important for sexual arousal because it can produce sexual fantasies and form attributes that turn us on or don't. Now let's look at some research that studied these brain systems and sexual arousal, starting with Sharif Karma's research. His team gathered 20 males and females and showed them erotic films, and they found that hypothalamus activation was significantly greater in male subjects, and also that the hypothalamus was larger in male-identifying people. Bruce Arnault did a study with only males to see if there were differences in the brain when men viewed erotic, relaxing, and sports materials. The right hypothalamus lit up on fMRI machines when erotic content was shown more than when they were shown the other two. But since the hypothalamus controls breathing, it was harder to tell the difference between natural brain functions and sexual arousal. These results were tested by measuring regional cerebral brain flow. RCBF was also used for Study 3, when Janico Georgiadis and team gathered 12 women and their partners to see the brain when the clitoris was stimulated. The scan lit up the motor cortex, hippocampus, so memory, and the amygdala, so automatic response. The motor cortex was on high alert with excess dopamine, and RCBF decreased during arousal. In essence, during a female orgasm, the brain stops its control over the body and behavior, and the body controls the brain in that instant. Our next study focuses on dopamine and serotonin. The NACC works with the pituitary gland since dopamine triggers hormone secretion. So Christos Karatsas tested neurotransmitter releases in rats and found that if serotonin decreased, arousal levels increased, and if dopamine levels increased, so did arousal. Dopamine is also related to the motor cortex since it rewards physical movement, further supporting Study 3. Now you can see how complex and interconnected brain systems are when it comes to sex. Next time you're in a spicy situation, see if your partner's brain and body reacts like the study shown here. Happy researching!